I'm here with Weijie Lai. Welcome to our interview. Um, Weijie Lai is a producer from based in Singapore and Toronto. Is the producer of Popeye, which was awarded at Sundance in 2017. Producer of Mongrel, which was awarded with the Caméra d'Or special mention at Cannes. And as a co-producer, you co-produce many movies, which include one of them is Viet and Nam, selected at Un Certain Regard Cannes Film Festival, and now nominated for Best Cinematography at Asia Pacific Screen Awards. Okay, so for first of all, I will love you
Mhm.
to introduce yourself and talk about your work and
Mhm.
say a little bit of this.
Okay. Um, I I feel really embarrassed, but no, I guess yeah, I've been a film producer, or I'd like to think I've been trying to be a film producer for quite a number of years, and I guess I've been very fortunate to be in a region, or in the past be in a region with like a lot of really exciting voices from all over Southeast Asia. There's like so many like really powerful filmmakers, and I've just been, I guess, lucky to be in the right place at the right time to meet with these people, and in some instances had the opportunity to work directly with them. So I try not to think of it so much as like a job, but it's just like a privilege more than anything, just to um, see these works come to life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And and then I wanted to know about something about the genesis of the latest project, Viet and Nam. Why did
Mhm.
you choose it? How did you meet the
Mhm.
director?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, to step back a little bit. So I met the director, yeah, 10 years ago, actually, maybe 10 years ago today.
Wow,
Coincidentally.
a
Yeah.
long
So,
time.
yeah. So I first met, Kui in 2014 in Singapore, because I was part of the Singapore International Film Festival at the time, as a programmer, and, one of the staff that was kind of running their auxiliary programs, like a film lab, a critics program, and things like that. So that particular year, Kui had a short film in the short film competition, and he was also developing his first feature film.
Mhm.
And at that same lab, was the delegate producer of Viet and Nam, Bradley Liao. So that was the first time I met Bradley Liao as well, who was developing his first feature.
Wow.
And at the same time, the other delegate producer, Bianca Balbana, she was presenting a film in the festival. I think it was a film in competition. So I met sort of the key sort of personnel for Viet and Nam in 2014, and got to know their work in 2014. And over the years, through programming at the film festival in Singapore, and meeting them at different festivals and in casual sort of settings, I got to know their work and know them as people. I got to see, Bradley's first feature, and see like Bianca's rapid growth to become like such an important figure in Southeast Asian cinema, and Kui as well. So to see him end up making that feature film that he was developing at the lab in Singapore, to making his second film, and just before the pandemic, Bianca, Bradley, and Hui reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're working on a new film."
Mhm.
And unlike Hui's first two features, which were a kind of hybrid documentary, narrative, experimental sort of works that were done very in a very tactile sort of way with a very small, intimate team. It's like, oh, we're working on something new, and we can't do it at that scale anymore. We need more help, basically. And I'm like, oh, I admire all of you so much, and I would love to find a way to be involved. So they sent me a deck um, of the of the project, and from the cover page, I
Right.
didn't even have to read any of the contents. Just on the from the cover page alone, I knew that if I had the opportunity, I had to do the film. The cover page was literally
Wow.
Viet and Nam, and then like a really strong charcoal drawing of a coal mine and two men in
Mm.
a coal mine. And I'm like, I don't even know what the film is about, but
Wow.
Viet and Nam, two shadowy figures in a charcoal drawn coal mine. I'm in. And
So yeah, it was kind of love at first sight.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then after looking at the materials, I remember because one thing I think about a lot as a producer is you're always thinking of how to present projects when they're not tangible, they're not concrete yet. You're trying to think of how can you present a project in the best possible way. And I remember looking at that deck and being like humbled and thinking like, not out of anger or envy, but looking at it and go, wow, I would never be able to put together a deck like that. There's something so special about this project, and it's a rare sort of occurrence. But I remember feeling that when I looked at the materials. Yeah.
So, and then after you read the script and
Mhm.
everything,
Mhm.
you also loved the story and everything.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
great. Because first you know them, and then
Yeah.
you had the chance to
Hmm.
develop in their project. That's very beautiful.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and then I would also love to talk about the fact that this movie was banned in Vietnam because
Hmm.
say that it portrays a gloomy, deadlocked, and negative view about the country and the people.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
how did you all deal with this?
Hmm.
And another question is, which were the main challenges that you faced during the production of the film?
Hmm. Um, it's a really good question, and it's a question that we get a lot, of course, about Vietnam. So I want to approach it very carefully because I want to be
Yeah.
sensitive about it. Um, I always feel like in cinema, this is my point of view at least, and maybe it's shared by some others. I always feel that it's important for the filmmaker and the creators to be as truthful as possible to the material. And if, you know your material well and you're honest with yourself, about what you're trying to communicate, if, certain entities or organizations take a certain offense or take a certain perspective of your film or your project, but you know that that's not your intention. You're clear, your conscience is clear about it. It's fine. You know,
Okay.
I can't, you can't change everybody's perspective or an entity or an organization's perspective. And I've always felt it's really important for filmmakers never to pander, because belief systems and things are constantly shifting and shape. So I think it's always important to be truthful. In terms of production, um, it was generally smooth, I would say. I mean, of course, with every single production without fail, there will be complications, it'll be difficult. But I would say that generally, the production for Vietnam went quite well.
Okay.
The process was generally quite smooth. And of course, at the end, we had to go through the paperwork of submitting it um, to the cinema department and things like that, with the optimism that there would be a positive outcome. But knowing because of the history of, maybe some of the films that preceded Vietnam, like one of my other films, Taste, you can
Mhm.
only go in with the best of intentions and knowing that
And
what you
hope
want
for
to
the
do.
best, but
Yeah, 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 exactly. And then the best thing you can do afterwards is to react to it. Yeah.
okay. Great. And then I wanted to know, so this movie deals with historical trauma,
Mhm.
historical wounds, and so the history of Vietnam is sort of a ghost,
Mhm.
which which is very present in the movie. And then it also talks about the queer experience. So
Mhm.
I'm curious to know how how was the reception from the audiences, and how was the
Mhm.
film received at the various festival that you attend
Mhm.
in these months?
Yeah. Um, I've only attended a couple of festivals with the film because I guess, which is a positive thing because the film has gone to so many festivals.
Yeah.
So all the different sort of team members are like going all over the place, which I suppose indicates that there's interest in the film, which is of course a really nice feeling. The festivals I attended were, yeah, I was in Cannes for the world
Okay.
premiere, and then I was at the screening in Toronto because I'm based there,
Mhm.
and then a festival in Montreal, FNC
Mhm.
festival in slow cinema. And of course, it's hard to say until you speak to people individually, but um, I thought the responses in each of the spaces were different. But generally, it felt really, really positive. Even in like in the instances where there were I could say like slightly heated sort of Q&As, there was still sort of a respect for what the film was trying to do. Maybe an audience member is not 100% convinced, but they know that the filmmaker, as I said earlier, is coming from a genuine place. And then there's just space for us to have a larger sort of conversation about, oh, is this the right way of portraying it? Is this the approach, or is this, well, I would like to share my perspective. So there's always been a very sort of respectful sort of response in every sort of city that the festival, I mean, every festival that the film has been screening it. And when I speak to my colleagues, it feels like it's a lot of the same. There's no hostility. Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
that's
far.
great. That's the
Yeah,
best
yeah.
thing that you could hope for.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Dialogue. I think dialogue is always really, really good.
Yeah.
If we disagree, that's fine. Good. Let's have like a
Mhm.
nice conversation about it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And then this is more of a technical curiosity because
Mhm.
I read an interview by the director and he
Mhm.
said that he
Yeah.
was used to use the 16 millimeters, but he
Yeah.
also said that the producers were not used to it. So I was like, how did you
Uh-huh.
deal with it with the
Uh-huh.
16 millimeters?
Uh, Uh-huh. It's a funny sort of thing because even with the two features that he made before that he shot on
Mhm.
16 millimeter with a tiny crew, um, in a funny way because even though those were small films and micro budget, the process of that was in a way simpler and more straightforward, and maybe because it was so small, it was easier to manage.
Mhm.
But because Viet and Nam was like an eight-country co-production, which
Yeah.
on paper shouldn't make any sense at all, but somehow it kind of worked.
Okay.
Um, Having eight countries involved and, various different governmental or private institutions involved meant there was a lot of like figuring out the jigsaw puzzle of how to make sure that everybody's um, obligations were fulfilled. And that became very,
Mhm.
very complicated. So, like you said, um, from a producing standpoint, yes, maybe if the film was shot digitally, it would be the workflow would
Mhm.
be simpler, but I don't think we would have gotten the film that we got. But to share a story, the funny thing about the
Yeah.
16 millimeter, because we had to fulfill obligations, um, the film stock went on like epic journeys across the world, terrible for, what is it, like climate and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
so the film stock went from Vietnam to
Okay.
Romania to France
Romania. Wow.
to the Netherlands. So which is kind of insane. And it,
Wow.
it shouldn't make any sense, but to fulfill sort of obligations, this was sort of a necessary step to take, which is a very counterintuitive one. But if we set all the administrative and logistical sort of things
Mhm.
aside, I don't think that Viet and Nam would be the film that it is if it was not shot on 16 millimeter. So it
It was
was,
worth it.
in a relative sense, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah.
And then, so you produced and co-produced many movies from different Asian countries like Vietnam,
Mhm.
Singapore, Taiwan, Indonesia, and the Philippines. So
Mhm.
I wanted to know, how's it like dealing with so many different countries and cultures from Asia?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
do you also think that these countries share some themes in common from a filmic point of view? For example, I think of slow cinema. Vietnam is an
Mhm.
example of it, and
Mhm.
also Apichatpong from Thailand, Lapdias
The
from the
shadow of a
Philippines.
Pichapong. Yeah,
Yeah, this slow cinema
yeah.
tendency,
Mhm.
and also many Chinese movies, independent
Yeah.
productions also
Mhm.
use slow cinema. So yeah,
Yeah.
you tell me something about your experience in working with
Yeah.
many different
Yeah.
countries and directors.
Yeah. I think that it might sound maybe a little bit idealistic or naive, but
Mhm.
I try to stay, I wouldn't say I try to stay innocent about it, but I try not to think whenever I work on a project or whenever I think about what I'd love to work on. I never try to think too hard about anybody's nationality.
Yeah.
So when I think about, let's say, like co-production,
Hmm.
um, I see it on a human sort of level. It's like, let's say, for example, I'm working with you. And you happen to be based in China. I happen to be based in Singapore. And this person that we would love to work with, which is our good friend, happens to be based in the Philippines. And then, this person happens to be based in
Hmm.
Thailand. But we're all really good friends, and we all have a sort of unified sort of vision of something that we would like to do together. So just circumstantially, just because of our nationality or where we are, it becomes a quote unquote co-production. So I think that if there's a unity in the kinds of works from the region or things like that. I mean, maybe I don't necessarily see it that way. I just see it as maybe naively, like I said, like as sort of human stories that I'm interested in, and maybe the other people that I've collaborated with that they're interested in, and nationality just happens to be a side effect or
Of course.
just a part of this. Yeah, yeah, just a part of this thing, and then um, we come together first to work together because we want to work together, and then the administrative and the financial sort of things come into play. But if they weren't in play, um, we would have worked together anyway. And related to like the forms of cinema, um, and yeah, I love slow cinema, and I also love, accessible things, and I love all types of cinema. But sometimes it's also, I guess, it also depends on like limitations too, and kind of maximizing and embracing the limitations that you have. So sometimes I think that slow cinema is facilitated by um, the resources that you have. So I'm
Mhm.
thinking back to masters like let's say like in Taiwan, Ho Xiaoshen, and how he formed his cinema language. It was because he didn't have money. So okay,
Yeah.
I don't have money to shoot. And I don't have a lot of time to shoot. So I'm going to cover the entire scene in one shot because I don't have time to do anymore. And what's the easiest way to cover an entire scene? In a wide shot. Um, so sometimes I think this sort of methodology comes from out of necessity.
Hmm.
And for better or worse, cinema coming out of Southeast Asia generally, I would say, I'm giving it in a very general sort of way. The
Yeah, of
budgets are significantly lower than, let's say, the budgets of a French film or
course.
an Italian film or a German film. So I don't know, maybe if you threw that money into a Southeast Asian filmmaker, the film vocabulary would change and become very different. So
Yeah.
sometimes I think it's related to yeah, what you have available to you. And then that shapes the way that you shoot, that shapes the kinds of stories that you tell. So rather than just complaining about it, a new sort of vocabulary is formed. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Hmm.
Okay. And then last question,
Hmm.
what are you working on next? Do you have
Hmm.
plans already or
Hmm.
if I can
Always, always.
you can
Whether
tell me.
they'll ever come to fruition is like a different sort of a different sort of conversation. But the concrete one. Next year, we're going into production. I'm on a project as a co-producer by Sompot. I don't want to try to pronounce his last name because I'll butcher it. But he's directing his first narrative film, Nine Temples to Heaven, and the delegate producers Apichatpong. So Sompot is known for his debut documentary that he made a couple of years ago called Railway Sleepers. So this is his narrative debut. And yeah, we're going into production next year, and I'm really, really excited about it.
So is it shot in Thailand, I think?
Yes, yes, it will be
Okay.
a road trip
Oh,
film
road trip.
in
Okay.
Thailand. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, that's so cool. Okay.
Mhm.
I wish you the best.
Thank you so much, and thank
And
you for your time. Yeah.
thank you so much for your time.